If you're storing your Mercedes R107 SL, one of the things you may have to make up is complicated brackets. This is the battery tray bracket like this, and there's an easy way to do it and a complicated way to do it. And we made this up the complicated way, which is joining two bits of metal and welding them together. And as soon as I'd done it, I realized there's a much easier way to do it if you happen to have some metal I-beams which we've just acquired. So this is a short video showing you how to make up complicated little brackets like this using the I-beams as clamps instead of a vise. So I'm just using some thin cardboard here to make the template, and we're using these neodymium magnets to hold that really tight so it can't move, and we should be able to trace around that and get an exact trace. There's our template. We're going to cut on the inside of the black lines because using a felt tip pen we couldn't get it very close to the edge, so we'll just cut on the inside. So this is a sheet of 18 gauge steel that we got from Euro car parts. And we're just going to lay it across two of these like that and lay the template on like so. So this is our template here, once again held tight to this with two magnets so it can't move. We've made our life slightly easier by lining up these two edges here and here, just save us having to do too many cuts. So measure 3 times, cut once. This is the piece we've already made up. I just want to get an idea for how accurate that template is. So we're going to be cutting with the angle grinder on the black lines, and that should give us the right dimensions. A friend of mine gave me a box of these cutting discs, and they're 1 mil thick. Normally we use a 0.8 mil thick, and the one thing that I noticed straight away using these thicker grinding discs is they kick off a lot bigger chunks of metal and sparks when you're cutting, and I've been using just these goggles when I'm cutting and then a full face mask when I'm grinding, but really these goggles are not good enough to use when you're using a cutting disc, because those little bits of metal that are coming off will end up burning your face if you're not careful. So we've got to make sure that these edges here are right in the middle of the two gaps on either side, because, and then we're going to draw 2 lines because those are going to be our fold marks down those lines. Once again we're using the magnet to hold everything in place. Really does make life a lot easier. It's going to be a lot easier to do these bends with these pieces still in place. It's always easier to bend bigger bits of metal than trying to bend tiny little bits. We're going to mark out which bits to cut and also which bit is the top, because it is incredibly easy to cut the wrong bit or fold it the wrong way. So that's going to basically sit on top of there. There we go. Okay, so my plan is I'm going to line this up with the inside edge there against there, just like so. And I'm going to plonk this one on top. We've got that firmly clamped in there. These 2 mole grips are super tight. And in theory, all we need to do now is bash that down with a hammer. Okay, so that's one bend done. You could, I suppose, if you wanted to, make a little cut along the back there with an angle grinder. I haven't done that on this occasion. Once again, I'm measuring, and I can see that if I actually line up to that big, thick black line, we should pretty much get a perfect fold, I would say. The advantage of doing this using I-beams is because if you try to do this in a vise, you'd probably find you don't have the correct clearance, but with I-beams we can bend this small piece round. We should be able to without any problems. Let's give it a go. As they say in German, der Moment, dass der Mensch vom Affen unterscheidet. Let's have a look and see how that's come out. Okay. Once again, measure, cut. I'm just using the template again to make one final measure up. That all looks pretty good. We can now cut, and we're just going to remind ourselves to be cutting on the inside of these black lines. For these cuts here, I'm just going to swap our cut-off disc back to the 0.8mm ones. I just find it gives me a little bit more control, probably just me. It probably sounds like I'm a neodymium magnet sales person, but a little trick to get rid of all of those metal shavings down there is just to put a magnet inside an old glove. And then these magnets are so powerful, they will easily pick up all of those filings, like so. And then you just need to turn the glove on itself, inside out like that. Get the magnet out and all of those filings will end up in the glove. You can just chuck that glove out. What I do now is just grind out all these sharp edges, do the last bends, fill the holes in, weld the nuts on, and it's job done. Now, call me cautious Colin, but I'm going to do a test bend on this scrap piece of metal first, just to make sure that that line is in the right place and that we bend it, this comes out to the right length. We're going to be bending this down, and therefore the black line I've got is showing. So that looks to be about right. We just need to remember that we don't need to bend that into a complete right angle because it needs to be greater than the right angle, but I think that's how we're going to bend it. So if all's gone to plan, which it has, these two are about exactly the same height. Just do a quick test fit on here. Make sure that it is the right height. That looks to be pretty much spot on. This last little bit, I'm just going to use 2 more grips and bend that by hand. So that's it. That's pretty much identical to that. Actually slightly thicker steel, which is better. And no welding. We're going to need to decide what bolts etc. we're going to use to attach. Now I'm going to use M6 16mm bolts with some M8 washers. I probably should use M6 washers, but I don't have any here. The only thing you've got to be aware of is that the head of your bolt sits below that level there where the battery will sit. And make sure you use a washer, because otherwise as soon as you tighten the bolt up you'll just scrape all the paint off. And the way these bolts attach to the brackets on the car is that you have a nut welded underneath, and the nuts are going to be obviously M6. Just need to drill the holes. We'll start with a 2.5mm pilot hole, and then we'll step it up to a 6.5mm hole. Now, although we're using M6 bolts, we're actually going 6.5mm on the drill because the bolts, the holes are slightly bigger than the bolts. Last thing we need to do is put the bolt through there and then just weld that bolt on. That bracket just in time for lunch. Took about 3 hours to make. It's come out pretty good. We just need to etch primer that and then paint it silver, the same colour as the car.